It was a cold evening in the small town. The streets were almost empty, and the last few people walking outside were in a hurry to reach home before the chill got worse. Inside a warm little restaurant, the smell of fresh bread and hot curry filled the air. People were laughing, eating, and enjoying their dinner. Behind the counter stood the restaurant owner, a man who had been working all day but still wore a gentle smile as he wiped down the counter. His eyes wandered toward the big glass window at the front. That's when he noticed a family standing just outside the restaurant door. A man, a woman, and two small children. They were not dressed for the weather. The father had a worn-out jacket with missing buttons, and the mother wrapped her arms around the kids, trying to shield them from the wind. The little ones looked cold and tired, their faces pale and eyes half closed from hunger. The owner paused for a moment. He could tell they had been standing there for a while, maybe deciding whether to walk in or not. Customers inside kept enjoying their meals, unaware of the family outside. But the owner couldn't ignore them. Something inside his heart told him to step closer. He pushed the door open and called out softly, "Come in. It's cold out there." The family hesitated. The mother whispered something to her husband, shaking her head. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they thought they would not be welcomed. But the owner's smile was warm and genuine. He gestured again. "Please, just come inside. You'll feel better." Slowly, the father nodded, and the family stepped into the restaurant. The warmth hit them immediately. The children's eyes lit up as they saw the tables filled with steaming bowls of food. Still, they stood quietly near the door, unsure if they really belonged there. The owner didn't ask too many questions. He simply guided them to a corner table away from the noise. "Sit down," he said kindly. "I'll bring you something to eat." The mother's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away so her children wouldn't notice. The father lowered his head, clearly struggling with his pride. He whispered a quiet thank you. The owner went into the kitchen and prepared a simple but filling meal: warm soup, fresh bread, and rice with vegetables. He carried the plates himself and placed them on the table. "Eat," he said gently. "You're safe here tonight." At first, the family hesitated, looking at each other. But hunger won. The children picked up spoons and started eating quickly, almost as if they were afraid the food might disappear. The mother tried to slow them down, telling them to eat properly, but she herself couldn't hold back. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she tasted the first bite. The father sat quietly, chewing slowly, his eyes staring down at the plate. Every now and then, he looked at the owner, as if searching for the reason behind such kindness. People in their situation rarely received it. The other customers noticed the family but didn't say anything. Some even smiled softly, realizing what was happening. The restaurant was still full of life, but in that little corner, something very different was unfolding. The owner brought them hot tea after the meal and even gave the children a small treat, a piece of warm sweet bread from the bakery section. The kids' faces finally lit up with pure joy. The kind of happiness only food and safety can bring after days of fear. As the family finished, the owner came back with a gentle tone. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" he asked. The father hesitated. His lips moved, but no words came out. The mother lowered her eyes, ashamed to answer. The silence said everything. The owner sighed softly. He knew the truth already. "I don't have much," he said, "but I have a small room at the back of this restaurant. It's not fancy, just a storage space, but it's warm and safe. You can stay there tonight." The mother gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes filling with fresh tears. The father finally spoke, his voice breaking. You would do that for us?" The owner nodded. "Yes, you need rest. Your children need rest. Tomorrow will be a new day." He walked them to the back, opened the small storage room, and laid out blankets and pillows. It wasn't much, but compared to the freezing streets, it felt like a palace. The children curled up together, smiling for the first time in days. The mother kept whispering thank you again and again. The father shook the owner's hand firmly, though his eyes still held unspoken pain. The restaurant grew quiet as the night went on, but in that little storage room, a family slept in peace, holding on to a hope they thought they had lost. And the kind man who gave them that hope sat alone at the counter, sipping his tea, wondering about their story, where they came from, And what would happen next? Little did he know. This one night of kindness was about to change not just the family's life, but his own as well. The night passed quietly in the little storage room behind the restaurant. The family slept deeply, wrapped in the old blankets the owner had laid out. For the first time in weeks, the children didn't shiver themselves awake, and the mother didn't have to stay alert, worrying about their safety on the streets. When the morning sun rose, the restaurant slowly came alive again. The clinking of pans in the kitchen, the smell of bread baking, and the faint sound of the radio all filled the air. The family stirred awake, blinking against the dim light peeking through a tiny window. The father sat up first, his back aching, but his heart strangely light. He watched his children sleep for a moment longer, realizing he hadn't seen them rest so peacefully in a long time. The mother stirred next, her hair messy, but her face calm. She whispered, "We should go before we cause trouble." Her voice was heavy with guilt. The father nodded slowly. He hated relying on the kindness of strangers. Yet, as he looked at his children, he knew they would not have survived another night outside in the cold. He stood, ready to wake them, but the door opened before he could move. The restaurant owner stepped inside with a smile. He carried a tray with warm porridge, fruit, and tea. "Good morning," he said kindly. "Breakfast is ready." The mother tried to protest. "Sir, you've already done too much. We cannot take more from you." But the owner shook his head gently. "Children should never start the day hungry. Please, eat first. Then we'll talk." The children woke at the sound of food being placed on the small table. Their eyes widened when they saw the steaming bowls. They quickly sat up, excitement breaking through their sleepy faces. The parents exchanged glances, part embarrassment, part relief, but they couldn't say no. As the family ate, the restaurant owner sat nearby, sipping his tea. He didn't ask many questions at first. He simply watched them with a quiet smile, giving them space to feel human again. But after a while, he asked softly, "Where are you from?" The father hesitated, then lowered his spoon. "We're from the other side of town. I had a job, steady work at a factory, but when the company shut down, everything disappeared. Savings went fast. Bills piled up. I searched everywhere for work, but nothing came through." He paused, his voice cracking. "We lost our home last month. We've been moving from place to place since then." The mother added quietly, "We tried staying at shelters, but they were full. Some nights we just walked the streets until morning." The children, "They've been so brave, but I can see how tired they are." The owner listened carefully. His eyes softened with every word. He had seen hardship in his life too, though in different forms. He knew how quickly circumstances could change. "You don't have to explain everything," he said gently. "Life can be hard. What matters is that you're here now. You're safe." The father lowered his head, ashamed. "It hurts, as a man, as a father, to not provide for them, to watch them suffer." The owner leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Don't carry that shame. Circumstances don't define who you are. What defines you is that you're still fighting for them, even when it feels impossible." The room grew quiet. The mother wiped her eyes, holding her children closer. The father sat still, his chest heavy, but his heart touched by the words. The children, innocent to the depth of the conversation, giggled softly as they ate the fruit slices. The sound of their laughter seemed to lift the heaviness in the room, if only for a moment. After breakfast, the family stood, ready to leave. The father said, "We can't keep taking from you. We'll find somewhere else tonight." But the owner shook his head. "Don't rush out into the cold again. Rest here one more night if you need to. I'll figure something." The family looked at him in disbelief. Kindness like this was rare. They didn't know how to respond. The father finally nodded. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." The owner smiled softly. "Repayment isn't needed. Just promise me something when life gets better, and it will. Help someone else the way I've helped you. That's all I ask." The father swallowed hard. "I promise." As the day went on, the family remained quietly in the storage room while the restaurant bustled with customers. Every now and then, the owner checked in, bringing snacks for the children or a blanket for the mother. But late in the afternoon, the father stepped out, asking the owner if he could help wash dishes or clean tables in exchange for their stay. The owner looked at him for a moment, then nodded. If it makes you feel better, then yes. Come help together." They scrubbed pots and wiped down tables. The father worked with quiet determination, and though it was simple work, he felt a flicker of pride returning. He wasn't just receiving help, he was earning it. As the night fell again, the family prepared to sleep in the small room once more. This time, there was less fear, less shame. There was still uncertainty, yes, but there was also hope. For the first time in weeks, they felt like tomorrow might actually bring something different. The restaurant owner locked up and stood outside, looking up at the night sky. He thought about the family, their struggles, and the promise of tomorrow. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he made to open his door that night would soon open a door for the family to one that could change everything. The second night in the small storage room passed with more peace than the first. The family no longer carried the same weight of fear as they had before. The children drifted into sleep faster, holding their blankets tight, while their parents lay awake a little longer, whispering softly about what might come next. There was still worry, but for the first time in many days, there was also a tiny flame of hope. The following morning, the restaurant was already alive when the family awoke. The sound of pans clattering, the smell of onions frying, and the steady hum of voices outside reminded them that life was moving forward. The children stirred first, rubbing their sleepy eyes. The mother brushed their hair back with her fingers, trying to make them look neat, even though she had no comb or fresh clothes for them. When they stepped out, the owner greeted them warmly. He had been up for hours, preparing meals for the day. "Good morning," he said with his usual smile. "There's tea on the counter. Help yourselves." The father hesitated. He still felt uncomfortable receiving so much without giving back. "Please, sir," he said, "let me work again today. I can wash dishes, clean floors, anything you need." The owner looked at him for a long moment and nodded. "All right, then you'll work here today. But you should know something: this is not charity. This is trust. When I let you work, it's because I believe in you." The father swallowed hard. The words touched him more than he expected. He wasn't being treated as a beggar. He was being treated as a man, as someone capable of standing on his own 2 feet again. And so, while the mother stayed back with the children, the father tied an old apron around his waist and stepped into the kitchen. He scrubbed pots until they shone, wiped counters spotless, and carried heavy boxes with determination. The sweat on his forehead didn't bother him. It felt good to be useful again, thought as he worked. The owner watched quietly. He admired the man's effort. Despite his situation, there was no laziness, no bitterness, only a quiet strength. At lunchtime, the restaurant grew busy. Customers filled the tables, laughter echoed, and the smell of fresh food traveled into the street. The family sat quietly in their corner, eating their meal, when a kind woman approached. She had noticed them the day before and leaned in gently to the mother. "Are these your children?" "They're beautiful," she said kindly. The mother smiled shyly, nodding. "Yes, they are. Thank you." The woman reached into her bag and handed the children 2 small chocolate bars. "A little treat," she said. The children's faces lit up, and they whispered thank you in unison. It was a small gesture, but it reminded the mother that kindness still existed in the world. She hadn't felt that in a long time. Later in the day, after the crowd had left, the owner sat with the father. "Tell me," he asked, "what kind of work did you do before?" The father explained about the factory, how he had spent years operating heavy machines, how the work was tough but steady. When it closed, everything collapsed. "I applied everywhere I could, but it's hard when you have no connections. People don't even look at you when they hear you've been out of work." The owner listened carefully. He thought for a moment before saying, "I may know someone. A friend of mine owns a small construction company. He's always looking for hard workers. If you're interested, I could speak to him." The father's eyes widened. You would do that for me?" The owner nodded. "You've already shown me you're willing to work hard. That's enough for me to believe in you." The father felt his chest tighten. For weeks, he had faced closed doors, rejection, and silence. Now, suddenly, there was a door opening. He didn't know whether to feel relief or fear, but he knew one thing: this chance could change everything. That evening, as the family sat together in their little storage room, the father shared what the owner had told him. The mother's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. "Do you think it's real? Do you think someone will actually give you work?" He nodded slowly. "I don't know, but I have to try. If this works, maybe we can finally stand again." The children, too young to fully understand, only clapped their hands happily. "Papa will have a job." They cheered. Their laughter filled the tiny room, bouncing off the walls like music. The father smiled at them, though deep inside, he carried both hope and fear. He didn't want to disappoint them again, but he also knew he couldn't let this chance slip away. As the restaurant owner closed up that night, he glanced toward the storage room where the family stayed. He knew tomorrow could be a turning point for them. A simple introduction, a simple act of trust. It could either change their lives or lead them back into the same struggles. He whispered a quiet prayer, not just for the family, but for himself too, because deep down, he knew that helping them wasn't just about giving charity. It was about rediscovering something in his own heart, something he didn't even know he had lost. The reminder that kindness could ripple far beyond a single act. And as the family lay together that night, holding onto each other, they didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time, they dared to dream again. The next morning began like any other at the little restaurant. But for the family in the storage room, it carried a weight that felt different. The father woke before everyone else, pacing quietly near the door. His heart raced with both excitement and fear. Today, the restaurant owner had promised to connect him with someone who might offer him work. It was a chance he hadn't had in months, and he was terrified of losing it. The mother stirred awake, noticing the lines of worry on his face. She placed her hand gently on his arm. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You've already given us hope again." Her words steadied him. He looked at her, at their children still curled up under the blankets, and realized that no matter how heavy his burdens felt, they were worth carrying for these three people. After breakfast, the restaurant owner joined the father outside. The air was crisp, but the morning sun gave a bit of warmth. "Ready?" the owner asked. The father nodded, though his throat felt dry. "I don't want to disappoint anyone." The owner placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, you're not disappointing anyone. You just need to show who you are. That's enough." Together, they walked to the small construction company on the edge of town. The building wasn't fancy, but the sound of hammers and saws echoed from inside the yard. Workers in helmets moved about, carrying wood and tools. The father's chest tightened. He remembered the rhythm of hard labor, the smell of sweat and dust. It was familiar, yet distant, like something from another life. The owner introduced him to the company manager, a broad-shouldered man with a sharp voice. "This is a good man," the owner said firmly. "He's hardworking. He just needs a chance." The manager crossed his arms, eyeing the father from head to toe. "Lots of people say they want work," he muttered. "Few stick around when it gets tough." The father swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. "Sir, I don't want charity. I want to earn. I've worked in factories for years. I can handle long hours, heavy lifting, whatever is needed. All I ask is one chance." Something in his tone caught the manager's attention. It wasn't desperation, it was determination. After a pause, the manager nodded. "Fine, come tomorrow morning. 6 sharp. We'll see what you're made of." The father exhaled, relief washing over him like a tide. He nodded quickly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." On the walk back, the restaurant owner smiled at him. "See, you just needed one door to open." But even as hope grew in his heart, the father couldn't forget how fragile their life still was. One chance didn't guarantee survival. He still carried the memories of the last few months like heavy stones in his chest. That night, as the family settled into the storage room again, he finally told them more of his story. The children were half asleep, but the mother listened closely, her eyes locked on his. "When I lost my job at the factory, I thought it would only be for a few weeks. I kept telling you, don't worry, something will come. But weeks turned into months. I sent out applications, knocked on doors, asked old friends for help. No one answered. People avoided me, as if unemployment was a disease they could catch." His voice trembled. "I sold my tools first, then the television, then our furniture. Piece by piece, everything went just to pay rent and food. But it wasn't enough. When the landlord gave us the notice, I begged him for more time. He just shook his head. That night, when we had to leave, I felt like I had failed as a husband and as a father. The mother reached out, holding his hand tightly. "You didn't fail us," she said softly. "We are still together. That's what matters. You never abandoned us." He shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "But our children, they had to sleep on benches, under bridges. They missed meals. I watched them shiver and cry, and I could do nothing. That memory will never leave me." The mother's voice grew firm, though her eyes shone with tears. "And yet, here they are, still laughing, still alive, because you kept going. You didn't give up. That's what they will remember, not the cold nights, but the father who never stopped fighting." The silence in the room was broken by the soft breathing of the children, who had fallen asleep. The father wiped his face and let out a deep breath. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of guilt lifted just a little. The restaurant owner, who had quietly stepped into the doorway and overheard part of the conversation, cleared his throat. "Life throws storms at us," he said softly. "But storms don't last forever. Sometimes we just need someone to shelter us until the sun comes back." The mother looked at him with gratitude too deep for words. The father simply nodded, unable to speak. That night, the family held each other close. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The father's first day at the construction company might be harder than anything he had faced before. But for the first time, the path ahead didn't feel impossible. And as the restaurant owner turned off the lights and locked the doors, he felt something stir inside him too. Helping this family wasn't just about kindness anymore, it was about reminding himself that even in a world that often turned cold, small acts of humanity could create warmth strong enough to change lives. The morning came quicker than expected. The father woke before dawn, heart pounding with nerves. He had hardly slept at all, but it wasn't from discomfort, it was from anticipation. Today was the day he would prove himself, the day he would finally step back into the working world. He looked at his children, still curled under their blankets, and then at his wife, who watched him quietly with soft eyes. "You'll do well," she whispered, brushing his shoulder as if her touch could push away the fear. The restaurant owner entered with a steaming cup of tea. "Drink this," he said. "You'll need the strength. And don't forget, work hard, but be safe. Construction can be tough." The father nodded gratefully. Every gesture, every word of encouragement, filled him with strength he thought he had lost. By 6 o'clock sharp, he stood outside the construction yard. Workers were already moving about, lifting beams, rolling carts of cement, shouting instructions over the noise of saws and hammers. The manager from the day before spotted him and gave a curt nod. "You're on time. Good start. Come with me." The father was handed a heavy pair of gloves and put straight to work. The tasks were rough, lifting wooden planks, hauling bricks, mixing cement. His body was not used to it after weeks of weakness, but he pushed through with determination. Sweat rolled down his face, his muscles ached, but every time he felt like slowing. He thought of his children sleeping in that storage room. He thought of their laughter when they had heard he might have a job. That was enough to keep him moving. The manager kept a sharp eye on him, occasionally barking orders. "Faster, watch your step." But as the hours passed, the manager noticed something: this man didn't complain, didn't cut corners, and didn't give up, no matter how heavy the load. By midday, the father's hands were blistered, but he didn't let go of the shovel. When the break came, he sat on the edge of the site, eating a small sandwich the restaurant owner had packed for him. The other workers watched him curiously, whispering among themselves. But one man sat down beside him and offered half of his apple. "First day's always the hardest," he said with a grin. "But you kept up. That says a lot." The father smiled faintly, taking the apple with gratitude. That small kindness felt like acceptance, like the first step toward belonging. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, the mother kept busy helping the owner with small chores. She wiped tables, organized napkins, and kept the children entertained. She insisted on working, not wanting to feel like a burden. The owner didn't stop her. He admired her quiet dignity, her determination to contribute in any way she could. As the day dragged on, she found herself glancing at the clock often. Every passing hour brought both relief and worry. She hoped her husband was strong enough to make it through. She hoped the job would not slip away as so many others had. When the sun finally dipped, The father returned, his clothes dusty, his face streaked with exhaustion. The children ran to him the moment he walked through the restaurant door. "Papa, Papa, how was it?" they cried. He bent down, hugging them tightly. "It was hard," he admitted, smiling faintly, "but I did it. And they told me to come back tomorrow." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She clasped his hands, feeling the blisters, the rough skin, the proof of his labor. To her, those wounds were not marks of pain, they were signs of hope. That evening, the restaurant owner served them all dinner, and for the first time, the father ate not as a man drowning in shame, but as a man beginning to climb back up. His posture was straighter, his eyes brighter. The children noticed it too, clapping and cheering Dot as they sat together. The father spoke softly to the owner. "You gave me this chance. I don't know how to thank you." The owner shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You showed up. You worked hard. That's what matters." But the truth was, the father knew he would never have made it this far without the owner's kindness. He had opened a door that everyone else had slammed shut. That night, when the family lay in the storage room again, their conversation was different. Instead of despair, there was planning. The mother whispered about saving money, about finding a small apartment again. The father spoke about buying clothes for the children, sending them back to school properly. The children, half asleep, mumbled dreams about toys and warm beds. For the first time, the future felt possible. Yet, deep down, the father knew this was just the beginning. A few days of work wouldn't erase months of struggle. The road ahead was still long, still uncertain, but he had his foot on it now, and that was enough to believe in tomorrow. And as the restaurant owner closed his restaurant late that night, he lingered by the door, listening to the faint sound of the family's laughter behind the storage room wall. It warmed his heart in ways he hadn't expected. He had thought he was helping them, but in truth, they were giving him something just as valuable, proof that kindness still mattered in a world too quick to look away. He smiled, whispering quietly to himself, "This is only the beginning." The days slowly turned into weeks, and the father's work at the construction company became more steady. Each morning, he woke before the sun, leaving the little storage room with determination in his steps. At first, the job was grueling. His muscles ached every night, his hands blistered and rough. But as time passed, his body grew stronger, his movements more confident. He no longer struggled to keep up with the other workers, he moved among them as an equal. The manager, who had been skeptical at first, began to notice. One afternoon, after the father carried heavy beams without a single complaint, the manager called out, "You've got grit. Men like you are rare." He clapped the father on the back. "Keep this up, and you'll be here a long time." Those words meant more than any paycheck. They were a sign that he belonged again, that he was not invisible. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, the mother found herself helping more often. She washed dishes, folded napkins, and sometimes even served tea when the rush was heavy. The owner didn't treat her like charity, he treated her like part of the team. And that gave her a quiet pride she hadn't felt in months. The children, too, changed. Their cheeks grew rounder from regular meals, their eyes brighter. They laughed more often, played around the tables when the restaurant wasn't busy, and even helped sweep the floor with little brooms. The owner would watch them sometimes, a smile tugging at his lips. He had grown fond of them, almost as if they were his own family. One evening, after the restaurant closed, the father came in, dusty from the construction site. He placed his first proper paycheck on the table. His hands trembled as he unfolded it, showing it to his wife. "Look," he whispered. "This is the first step." The mother pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The children leaned over curiously, not quite understanding, but sensing the joy. "Does this mean we can have our own home again, Papa?" the little one asked eagerly. The father pulled them close. "Not yet," he said gently, "but soon. Very soon." From that day on, their conversations changed. At night, in the little storage room, they no longer spoke about surviving the next day. They spoke about saving money, about finding a small apartment, about buying clothes for the children. The mother dreamed aloud about cooking in her own kitchen again, about planting a few flowers by the window. The children giggled about having beds to jump on, or a little desk for drawing. The father listened to them all, his heart swelling with both hope and determination. For the first time in months, he wasn't haunted only by guilt, he was driven by possibility. Weeks later, with careful saving and the restaurant owner's guidance, the family managed to rent a small apartment. It wasn't big, and it wasn't fancy, just 2 small rooms with peeling paint and creaky floors. But to them, it was a palace. When they opened the door for the first time, the children ran from corner to corner, laughing and shouting. The mother stood silently in the middle of the room, her hand over her mouth, tears falling freely. The father knelt down beside her. "It's not perfect," he whispered, "but it's ours." She nodded, unable to speak, and hugged him tightly. The restaurant owner came by later that day, carrying a box. Inside were small gifts, a set of plates, a few blankets, and a pot for cooking. "Every home needs a start," he said with a grin. The mother hugged him in gratitude, her eyes filled with emotions too deep for words. From that day forward, the family's life truly began to transform. The children were enrolled back into school. Their faces glowed with excitement as they put on their simple uniforms, carrying books proudly in their arms. The father worked long hours at the construction site, but every evening, he returned to his family, proud of the sweat on his brow. The mother took part-time cleaning work nearby, determined to add her share. Life wasn't suddenly easy, it was still filled with long days, tired nights, and bills that sometimes stretched afar. But compared to the darkness they had lived through, it was full of light. And through it all, the restaurant owner remained a steady presence. The family often came to visit him, sometimes sharing meals, sometimes just sitting to talk. The children adored him, calling him uncle, and he laughed heartily every time. One evening, the father pulled him aside. "You didn't just give us food and a roof," he said quietly. "You gave us back our dignity. I don't know how to repay you." The owner shook his head. "I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. You just needed someone to remind you it was still there." The father stood silently, his eyes wet. In that moment, he realized something important. Kindness didn't just save lives. It rebuilt them. As the family settled into their new life, the restaurant owner often thought back to that cold night, when he had first seen them outside his window. He had almost ignored them, almost looked away like so many others. But he hadn't, and because of that one choice, an entire family's story had changed. The ripple of that decision was still unfolding, touching not only the family, but also everyone who saw what had happened. It was proof that compassion could be powerful, that even a single act of generosity could turn despair into hope. Life had changed completely for the family. The days of sleeping on benches and wandering the streets had faded into memory. Now, they woke up each morning in their little apartment, sunlight streaming through cracked windows, laughter filling the air as the children prepared for school. The father went to work with pride, and the mother managed both her part-time job and the household with quiet determination. They were not wealthy, but they were rich in something far more valuable: hope. Yet, the story didn't end with just their recovery. What no one expected was how far the ripple of one act of kindness would spread. The restaurant owner never spoke publicly about what he had done. He never boasted about giving shelter or introducing the father to a job. To him, it was just the right thing to do. But word has a way of traveling, even when it isn't spoken loudly. Customers who had noticed the family in the restaurant began to ask questions. They whispered to one another, telling the story of the night a kind man opened his doors to strangers. Soon, the story moved beyond the restaurant's walls. Neighbors in the town started to talk. Some were surprised, others were inspired. Many had walked past homeless families without stopping, without offering more than a passing glance. But when they heard about what the restaurant owner had done, they began to wonder, could I do the same? One evening, a group of local shopkeepers visited the restaurant. They shared their admiration with the owner. "You reminded us," one of them said, "that helping doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's just opening a door." Another nodded, adding, "We see people struggling every day, but we've convinced ourselves we can't help. You showed us otherwise." Slowly, changes began to appear around the town. The bakery next door started giving away unsold bread at the end of the day, instead of throwing it away. A clothing shop quietly left a rack of jackets outside after hours, free for anyone who needed them. Even the barber began offering free haircuts to those who couldn't afford it. The family noticed the difference too. When the children walked to school, they saw fewer people turning away from those in need. Instead, they saw small gestures: a neighbor offering warm soup to someone sitting in the cold, a shopkeeper handing out gloves. Each act was small on its own, but together they created a wave of compassion. The father often thought about this ripple effect. One evening, after finishing work, he sat with his wife on their apartment balcony, the children already asleep inside. "It's strange," he said softly. "I used to think no one cared, that the world had turned its back on us. But now I see that kindness can awaken kindness. Maybe people just needed to be reminded." His wife smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you are proof of what happens when someone is given a chance. You're not just working for us, you're showing others what's possible." Months passed, and the family became part of the community again. They often visited the restaurant, not just to eat, but to spend time with the man who had changed their lives. The children called him Uncle now, running into his arms whenever they saw him. The restaurant owner, once just a businessman keeping his shop alive, found himself surrounded by a new sense of purpose. His act of kindness had not only saved a family, it had given him a deeper connection to the world around him. One day, the father brought his children to the construction site, wanting them to see where he worked. The manager welcomed them warmly and told the kids, "Your father is one of the hardest workers we have. You should be proud." The children beamed, their small chests swelling with pride. For them, their father was no longer just the man who had once struggled, he was their hero. As the seasons changed, the family's life continued to improve. They saved more, bought secondhand furniture for their apartment, and filled their home with laughter and warmth. It was not luxury, but it was stability, and that meant everything. But what mattered most was the lesson they carried in their hearts. The father remembered the restaurant owner's words clearly: "When life gets better, help someone else." One cold evening, while walking home from work, the father noticed a young man sitting near the bus stop, shivering under a thin jacket. For a moment, the old memories rushed back: the hunger, the cold, the hopelessness. He walked past, but then stopped. He couldn't. He turned around, handed the man his gloves, and said, "You'll need these more than me tonight." It was a small act, but it was the beginning of him keeping his promise. That night, as he told his wife what he had done, she smiled knowingly. "This is how it spreads," she said. "Kindness doesn't end, it keeps moving from one heart to another." The restaurant owner watched all of this unfold over time, humbled by how far things had come. He realized something profound: sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from money or power, it comes from simple humanity. Opening a door, sharing a meal, offering a chance. Those were the things that truly mattered. And so, what began as one quiet act of generosity grew into something much larger: a movement of compassion. In their small town, lives were touched, dignity was restored, and hope was rekindled. For the family who had once stood outside a restaurant on a freezing night, life would never be the same again. And for the man who had opened his door, he would carry the truth with him forever: when you choose kindness, you don't just change one life, you change the world around you.